It's April 24th, 2019. I'm your host, Stephen Van, over here on the Sports Talk Line Network, where we talk sports 24/7, 365. Today, we review NFL Draft Talk's Connor Livesay's top 75 rankings for the upcoming NFL Draft. And why not do it with the man himself, Connor Livesay? Good day, sir.
What's going on, man? How are you?
Oh, man, look, I'm excited. We've been going through the list here, working our way up. I mean, you had a huge board, and we've been going, a chunk at a time. Finally, we're to the top 75. I'm ready to dive right in. 67, DeMarcus Lodge, Ole Miss wide receiver. Then 66, Amon Oruwayne. Did I say that right? Oruwayne?
It's Amani Uwaware.
Oh, dude, I just felt I butchered that. I apologize all the way. All right. Okay, and at number 66, we have... That's your cue right there. We have? Okay, you get to say the name, not me.
Amani Uwaware.
All right. Thank you. We appreciate you stepping in there. Okay. All right, 65, Eric McCoy, Texas A&M. 64, Rennell Wren, Arizona State. 63, Emmanuel Hall, Missouri wide receiver. We're ripping through these because the guys we're going to talk about are a little higher. All right, 63, Emmanuel Hall, wide receiver, Missouri. You got to love that. Charles Omenihu, Texas. That's a defensive lineman there. DeAndre Walker, Georgia, edge rusher. Juan Thornhill, Virginia safety, as we continue to rip through it. And we finally get to a guy that's on my list at 59, Andy Isabella. And he's not alone on my list, okay? Because we're going to jump around here from Andy Isabella. And then at number 39, there's Deebo Samuels, two wide receivers that I think have a very good likelihood of filling a similar role with whatever team they end up. What I want to ask you about, Connor, is which one of these wide receivers is going to bring a better value? Okay, and why? Because they're going to be drafted in varying rounds. I mean, it could be 2-3 rounds apart, right?
I'm not sure if it'll quite be that far, but yeah, you're right. You're looking at Deebo probably going in the beginning to mid portions of the second round, in those top 50 to 70 picks. Is kind of what you're looking for with Deebo. And then with Andy Isabella, he could go anywhere from the 70 that we just mentioned to anywhere to 90. Guys. Deebo is a little bit bigger. He's a little bit better of a physical route runner. But Andy Isabella is a freak athlete. He's a shorter guy, a smaller guy that's going to make his money probably in the slot at the next level. But he's a guy who can test the field vertically out of the slot. Where Deebo is a guy who's he's not a burner by any means, but he can test the field vertically as well. But he's going to win in those shorter to intermediate portions of the field, catch the football, and then make plays after the catch. Where Isabella is a guy who's going to use his speed to get behind the defense and then catch the ball and get around the defense. So similar players like you mentioned, but I'd say the better value would probably be a guy like Isabella, who's going to go probably 20, 30 picks later than Samuel, but a similar skill set that can bring similar return skills and similar skills out of the slot as a wide receiver.
Interesting guys, man. I love both of them. I think they're a lot of fun. Let's jump on up the list. At running back, we've got David Montgomery here, multi-skill running back, Ohio State. David Singletary, Florida Atlantic running back at 57. 56, we have Rashawn Gary, Michigan edge rusher. Then another guy that comes up on my list at number 56, Miles Sanders, the Penn State running back. And I got to talk to you about him, and here's why. I want to ask you this one question. Let's say we got a scale, and on one end of the scale, we've got DeMarco Murray. Went to the Cowboys at first, but then bounced around the league. Did fairly well, as you might say. Has some records in his pocket. On the other end, we have Reggie Bush. I see some of these guys in him. He's just such a well-rounded back. Where do you think he sits on the scale between DeMarco Murray and Reggie Bush? Which running back is he closer to skill set-wise, and why?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I like the comparisons there because I like what DeMarco Murray could do as a receiver, as a running back. He can kind of do three-down back is what you know when you have DeMarco Murray. But Reggie Bush never developed into that three-down back. He was kind of more of a third-down back. You put him on the field, you throw him the football, kind of a quick twitch type of guy. And I think that's where Miles Sanders is more going to fit in early. I think he has the potential to be a three-down DeMarco Murray style of back. But I think early on, he's going to be a guy that you want to get in there as a change of pace guy, a guy who can run the ball. He can run in between the tackles. He has good vision. good contact balance, but a guy I think you want to get the football to on third down out of the backfield, maybe in those shallow portions of the field, and let him, make some plays with his legs after the catch. But a guy who's got potential to be a 3-down back. He might be one of those, third, fourth round guys who develops into a top 10 back in the, first 2 or 3 years in the league. And we're going, why did we let that guy slip to the third or fourth round? That's what I kind of see with Alzheimer's.
Right. Or it could go the other way, right?
It could.
All right. But I don't know. I agree with you, man. The guy's exciting. And as he matures, he's going to have the ability, the chance to put on a little more weight, a little more muscle, and not that he needs a whole lot more muscle. I mean, the guy is built.
Yeah.
But wow, he's an exciting guy. I love watching him, man. I really do. Then we have 37, Kelvin Harmon, North Carolina State wide receiver. A.J. Brown, Ole Miss wide receiver. I got a good feeling about him, don't you?
Yeah, guy who's going to play in the slot. Nothing special in any aspect of his game, but a guy who's consistent. He's a hand catcher. He's a good route runner. He's a big physical receiver who's got some athleticism. Guy who's going to probably get drafted possibly in the back end of that first round on Thursday or really early on Friday and have a long career in the NFL.
Yeah, I suspect if he makes it out of the first, that there may be a trade up jockeying. He's one of those guys that if he's available on day 2, you might see a trade up to try and land this guy, right?
Could happen. Just depends on how these wide receivers fall. If only one of them goes in the first round, then a lot of these teams are going to sit back and let whatever guy falls to them fall to them. But if a few of those guys end up going in the first, you could definitely see some teams starting to panic and move around a little bit.
All right, next up is another one of your safeties, man. Nasir Adderley out of Delaware. That's a guy, well, they're all really intriguing. This is a great safety class. Chase Winovich, Michigan, edge. Wow, that guy brings a lot to the party. Then Marquis Brown, Oklahoma wide receiver. Dexter Lawrence, Clemson defensive L, DL. Okay, Hakeem Butler, Iowa State wide receiver. Then we have Yaqui Polite, Florida edge. This is a guy, man, I mean, he's bouncing all over the boards with guys, isn't he? Yeah?
Yeah, rough off season for Ja'Kai Polite, but a guy whose tape is probably top 10 material, guy who was in my top 10. Off season didn't go as planned for him. Had a lot of issues with his combine training, pro day training, added some sloppy weight, but a guy who, if you feel okay about his off the field, you feel okay about his work ethic, and you're going to get a guy who should have been drafted in the top 10 before this bad series of events happened for him.
Okay, so you heard from the Raiders and who else? I'm just asking, okay? Yeah. All right, number 29, DeAndre Baker, Georgia cornerback. And at this point here, at this level, we're getting into a group of guys. These guys got some serious talent combined with some production, but a few of the guys are not production-oriented. They're trait-oriented. They're just off the charts with their traits, right?
Yep, some of these guys who might not have the college production, but again, you look at their measurables, you look at their testing, you look at what they showed in burst on film, then you put that all together and you go, man, in a few years with NFL coaching, these guys could be, blue chip players, and that's why they're in this top 30, list for me.
All right, so next up we got Damian Harris, Alabama running back, then Andre Dillard. They're at offensive tackle, Washington State. Taylor Rapp, another safety you and I both like a lot. Okay, and so anyhow, we have Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, the Florida safety. Man, the safety. Taylor Rapp, Chauncey Gardner. Is that like a 1 and 2, a 2 and 1, 1A, 1B? Yeah. Are these guys that neck and neck because they bring a different game, don't they?
One guy is a more versatile, almost a defensive back, a guy who can play in the nickel, he can play down, he can play back, showed off great range as far as his ball skills. That's a Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Then Taylor Rapp's a guy who you're going to want to play down, doesn't have the best athleticism, doesn't have the best range in coverage, but a guy that has good sideline-to-sideline range in the box. So he can make plays against the run, but he's not a guy that you're going to want to play deep in single coverage and let him just, roam the back part of that defense. But again, these guys literally graded out with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson got a .01 better grade than Taylor Rapp for me just because of some of the things he did in coverage with his range. So when you say 1A, 1B, it's about as close as it gets as far as my grading goes.
But basically in college, you're that professor, right? You will make the call. You will make the cut. All right.
Gotta do it. Can't have a 33 and a 33A. You gotta separate it. So
There it is. There it is. Okay, we'll see how that turns out. And I'm actually going to ask you. I'm going to ask you, man, to separate the next two guys. And they're close on your scale, but not that close. And I'm talking about Devin White, their number 24, the LSU linebacker. And what I want to talk to you about is not his skill set per se, but I want to compare him to the other guy. And I see, depending on which board that you're on, him and Devin Bush being bounced around. I mean, some people get ridiculous with it, but most people keep them somewhat within, 5 to 10 picks of each other. There's no doubt that both are talented, both have production, right? But in your eyes, what is the difference, and which guy is going to move on to a better NFL career because of that one small difference in his skill set?
yeah, you look at a guy like Devin White who has the size, he has the length, he has the athleticism, and you turn on the tape and it's a bit underwhelming at times. Not that it's an underwhelming series of games or reps, but it's just inconsistent. That's probably a better word to use than underwhelming. You see games where he's just he's by far the best player on the field. He's making every tackle. He's always around the football. And then there's games where he's still around the football. He's always around the football, but he's just inconsistent in his tackling. His eyes kind of fail him at times. Where Devin Bush, who's a similar athlete, doesn't quite have the size and the length, but he has more of an effort, more of a motor, more instincts because of that lack of size. He just sees the field better than what Devin White does. He's always in position to make tackles. He tackles hard. He tackles through you. For a small guy, he hits you hard. He hits you fast. And again, he's not a big guy. He can line up in the middle. He can line up outside. He can roam sideline to sideline. He can cover. He can make plays in the backfield. So to me, Devin Bush is Devin White. Athletic ability, just not quite the size, but his instincts and consistency as a tackler and coverage man is a little bit better than White. And that's why I have them separated by about 12 picks.
12 picks. I mean, now that doesn't sound like that much, but at that point in the draft, I mean, how many millions of dollars is that, man?
And it's only 9. So
okay, only 9.
I thought it was 12. It's only 9.
Well, there you go.
So
okay.
Not quite 12.
Yeah, because, like you, I see them and, they both have a good motor. That's not what we're saying at all. But to me, you look at the one guy and Bush, he's like a Porsche of German engineering. He's very comfortable running at a very, very high RPM. Whereas the other guy, he just doesn't keep it lit as much. He runs at a high RPM, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that he's taking plays off or anything like that. I'm just saying he doesn't keep it lit, and it's probably because just what you said, I don't think he sees the game quickly enough to be able to enact that constant, acceleration like Bush can. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and it just goes back to the instincts. A guy who can see things develop before they happen, can see blockers, develop before they happen, and be able to get to a spot before that blocker does, get around that blocker, get in the holes, shoot gaps. The instincts, awareness to see which routes these receivers are going to run. Bush just came off as a smarter player that didn't quite have to rely on his athleticism as much as Devin White did. Where White has great athletic ability, he has great size, he has great length. But he just didn't react as good as I wanted to see a guy with it. And that again, goes back to the potential, the traits that you were talking about. If he can put that together, if he can build those instincts, that awareness, his ceiling is sky high. Where I think
and you don't know if that's going to click on. You do not know. I mean, sometimes it does. I mean, yeah. And this guy, he doesn't have any motor problems. He doesn't have that vision, that you're talking about. All right, slipping up the list. Garrett Bradbury, North Carolina State. All right, offensive center is what you call him. That's what I see him as well. But what I want to ask you about is, like, I've looked at the film of this guy. This is a guy that I followed, I looked at, and I'm going to ask you, is he as balanced as what my eyes see? Because his skill chart, okay, when you do his skill set chart, it's a spider web. There really is no divot on foot speed or anything, or strength, because usually if you got a guy with fast feet, he's not as strong, or vice versa. Or if he's intelligent, that he's not athletic. I mean, this guy is everything. And he's just so balanced. He seems like a total package. I just love him. What do you see on tape? And why do you think that?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that you can kind of knock him for is he's the size. He's not the biggest guy, but he doesn't play like a smaller guy. He plays with a strong anchor. He plays with a thick lower half, where he's able to anchor to these bigger defensive linemen and really control them at the point of attack. But again, you mentioned it. He's got the athleticism. He's got the length. He's got the power, the strength that it involves to play in both a man and a zone blocking scheme. So he's versatile. He isn't a scheme-dependent interior offensive lineman. He can play in zone. He can play in man. But the one thing you love with him is he's just so intelligent. He's always the first guy to reach his blocker. You know, when these guys are moving, these offensive linemen, when they're getting to the second level, he's always in the right position. He's reading these defenses.
So he vectors right in. He figures it all out on the fly.
Well, we talked about those instincts with a guy, like Devin White, Devin Bush. We talked about the instincts. Instincts as a lineman doesn't come into play as much, but it also means something to me when you get these move blocking schemes where they're, running the outside zones and you're having, centers, combo block guys. You're having these centers, shed defensive tackles and then get into the second levels and get into the linebackers. And he just has such a good feel for how to get skinny. We use that a lot with defensive linemen, getting skinny, shooting gaps. But with centers, I like to use that sometimes too. When they get skinny, they don't get caught up in the trash of those defensive linemen and then struggle to get to the second level.
Working through that trash for either an offensive lineman or a defensive lineman. You live in the pit, especially if you're a nose tackle, an inside tackle or an offensive guard. You live in the pit and working through the trash. If you don't have that skill set, you're limited, aren't you?
Yep, and he's not limited in any one area. He's probably one of the most complete players in this draft, one of the most safe players in this draft. You're going to draft him probably in the first round, and you're just going to get a guy who's probably going to play. I don't know if he's going to be an all-pro ever, but he's going to be a Pro Bowl level player for every year, until he gets old and beat up and he can't move anymore. But when he's young and he's healthy, he's going to be a Pro Bowl level player for every year he's healthy.
I can hardly wait till he gets in. I hope he goes to a team I like. Okay, and it never works out. The guys I really like, they always end up on like the team across from who I like. That's the way it goes. Okay, next up, Quinnen Williams, another Clemson. Oh, what? Defensive lineman. I'm shocked. Wow, near the top. How can that happen? All right, moving on. We could actually have a Clemson show. Why don't we do that? Devin Bush, we just talked about him, the linebacker, just a few picks apart. All right, Cody Ford is next. We're going to zip up the list now. He's an Oklahoma offensive tackle. Montez Sweat, Mississippi State edge. Ooh, he would be fun to talk about. I mean, that's a guy that's all over the boards, man. Brian Murphy, Washington cornerback. Noah Fant, Iowa tight end. Got to tap the brakes real quick. Give me his best one skill set that is not physicality or spark in the sentence.
Man, that's tough because his best thing is his athletic ability. A guy who can run, he can jump, he can catch. He's got a crazy catch radius. So it's tough because he's one of those traits guys, a guy that you're taking who had production in college. He has some inconsistencies catching the football, but his route running, that's kind of builds in with his athletic ability. He's just a guy who's able to get in and out of breaks with ease. He has, very flexible legs, very flexible hips, so he can rip, bend, and dip out of breaks to create that separation. So I'll use separation as a route runner is his best trait, a guy who can get open using that athleticism to create separation. So that's probably his best thing, a guy who can line up in the slot as a big wide receiver and create separation.
Okay, we'll keep him spun up in your head here because we're going to go up one pick to number 10 on your list, and we have DK Metcalf out of Ole Miss, wide receiver. Explain to me why this isn't the same player at a position that's going to pay a little more money.
Well, the difference between those guys is Metcalf is more of a vertical player. He's a guy who's going to excel, running a straight line, going up in contested catch situations in the red zone. But he's not a guy that has that flexibility in his hips and his legs. He's kind of a stiff athlete. So when it comes to getting in and out of his breaks, he's not as good. But when you're throwing the deep ball, when you're throwing the 9 routes, when you're going up and doing the back shoulder fades in the red zone, and you're just giving the football to him and saying, "Hey, go up and get it." He's a guy who's going to beat you 9 out of 10 times. He's going to
So when you look at his his skill set chart, the spider web, his looks really great, and then his this huge hole because he can't move laterally, right?
Yeah, his three cone's not good. His short shuttles aren't good. So yeah, exactly. You look at his spark spider chart, and it's going to look very full. And then you get to that three cone, you get to the short shuttles, and it just zips all the way down. One of the worst wide receiver testings for those two drills at the combine. So he's a guy that, like I said, not going to be a great route runner in and out of his breaks. A guy who can work on that. He can become a better. He can learn how to use his stiffness to be a more physical in and out of his breaks, to get that subtle push off to help. But a guy who's never just going to look like an Odell Beckham coming in and out on the slants and the post.
Oh, no. But for the first, I don't know, game or three, he'll be able to cut left or right and be wide open because they're going to go like, well, he did what? Just, no, they're not going to be expecting it.
Or he'll run right by you.
Yeah, exactly. You have to respect that because, he can do it. All right, next up, Jonah Williams, Alabama offensive tackle at 9. Jeffrey Simmons, Mississippi State defensive lineman. Ed Oliver next at 7, the Houston defensive lineman. Oh, we got to love the defensive line in this draft, right?
That's right.
Next up, Juwan Taylor, Florida offensive tackle. And he's the highest rated offensive tackle on pretty much everybody's board, isn't he?
Maybe. I haven't looked at a lot of other people's boards. I know some people like Jonah Williams. Some people even like Cody Ford as their top offensive tackle. For me, Juwan Taylor, he's not going to play on the left side at all. He's on right tackle only, which is rare to have a right tackle stand at the top of the rankings for offensive tackles. But he's a guy that's just so good in everything he does. He's a really, really good pass blocker, but he can get out in space with a real tenacity style run blocking ability. Can run you over, can run through you, but can just stand in front of you and control you as well. So a guy he's so consistent in everything he does as a pass blocker and run blocker that even though he's a right tackle only, he's that valuable.
All right, there you go, man. And then you have, Juwan Taylor, Florida. We just talked about him. Brian Burns, Florida State edge. And next up, a guy, Josh Allen, Kentucky edge, another spark candidate, right? I mean, he is off the chart spark. I only got one question I want to ask you about him, and that is how many years till he breaks out and becomes the player that everyone expects him to be? Because it's not going to be in year one, or is it?
No, I don't think so. I think in 2017, Josh Allen was a guy who, looked like he could be a second, third round pick, but he completely remodeled his game. He developed better hand technique. He developed more pass rush counter moves. He came in 2018 and just looked like a completely different player. Not that he was a bad player before, but he made the biggest jump in development from his 2017 season to his 2018 season out of anyone in this draft class, out of anyone that really I've ever watched. The jump between that year and this year was huge. He's just a guy who you're going to line up. He can play outside linebacker. He can line up at weak side defensive end. And he's going to win with his speed. He's going to win with his athleticism. He's going to win with his length. And you have to be able to stop those things if you want to stop him. And he, I'm not going to sit here and compare him to a guy like, Khalil Mack, because that's just ridiculous to compare him to somebody like that. But he has a similar traits that a guy like Khalil Mack has. He's not quite as powerful. He's not quite as strong. But he's a guy. Khalil
Mack's mind is what makes him that. But you're saying physicality-wise, they will use similar tools in order to get the job done for them, right?
The traits are very similar in the two players. He's got the length, the speed, the explosiveness, and the size. So some pass rush development, as getting coached up into these NFL standards. I really think that his ceiling is sky high. Is a pass rusher.
Well, a lot of people agree with you. The next guy on your list, okay, at number 2, again another edge rusher. What a talented draft for the defensive line. And you're picking Nick Bosa at number 2, like his brother out of Ohio State. And the reason I mention his brother specifically is, and that's what I want to ask you. The trait that I think sets his brother apart, and I think that these guys are very, very similar to each other, is Bosa's ability to disconnect his lower body and his upper body. And as he takes and move on whatever direction he's going, he's able to hand fight and pick the other guy's hands out of the air, get his hands on the other guy, and that gives him a huge advantage. He understands leverage. He has power with that lower body. How does his brother rate versus the guy that's in the NFL right now? A lot of people say that he's better than what his older brother is when he came out. What do you see? Do you think it's a fair comparison? Why not?
He's the same exact player. I mean, I know it sounds silly. It almost sounds, it sounds lazy to compare Nick Bosa to Joey Bosa, but they're literally the same exact player. They're a guy who's going to line up. They're going to be able to defend their run at the point of attack using that length, using that leverage. But they're also guys who just have great technical aspects to their game as pass rushers, have great hand technique, like you said, their hand placement, their nuances as pass rushers are just, it's above and beyond anyone else really in this class. They're just guys who know how to get their hands on the opposing offensive tackle's elbows, control their hands, and then they're able to just out leverage these guys, use their weight, their speed to out athlete a lot of these tackles. And that's what he's going to do. I mean, it's as I said, it almost seems lazy, but if you want a comparison for Nick Bosa, the easiest one is his brother Joey Bosa because they play the exact same game.
And you mentioned something in passing that I think is amazing about both of them. And certain guys can do this. Aaron Donald does this as well, a lot of the great ones. As opposed to reaching out and just trying to smack hands, which is basic hand fighting, these guys will reach out, and instead of grabbing the hand, they'll reach underneath and grab your elbow and just throw your arm out of the way. So, it's amazing.
Yeah, you control offensive tackles, elite technicians at pass rush. They shoot for more of the elbows than the hands because the hands you can get right back real quick. With an elbow, you're pushing their whole arm. I'm demonstrating it, but you're getting their whole arm. You're getting their shoulders turned away from your target. And if you get their shoulders away from the quarterback,
they're out of balance.
You're able to swim. You're able to rip under. You're able to spin. There's so many things you can do where if you just smack a hand, I'm still square. I can still stay square to you. Yeah. If I get your elbow and I get my power, your elbow away from the target, I turn your shoulders, get your shoulders away from that target. I'm able to spin at that point. I'm able to swim over. I'm able to rip under. I can do so many different things if I get my hand placement on your elbow and leverage your body out of control of the quarterback path. If I can do that, there's so many different ways that I can beat you to get to the quarterback.
Oh, yeah, and, get my hands inside, possibly on your ribs with your shoulder up, then, I own you. It's Christmas. I'm going to be on ESPN highlights at that point. Okay. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. All right, the last guy I want to talk about is a guy that is my favorite guy in the draft. And all I got to do is just ask you my one question for him. Mr. Quinnen Williams, the defensive lineman. Bama. Aaron Donald, yes, no. That's it. That's all you got to ask about this guy. That's all I want to know about this guy. I know what I see. What do you see?
They're different, but disruptive ability, they're the same. I don't think Quinnen Williams will ever have the sack numbers that Aaron Donald has because he's not quite the up-the-field player that Aaron Donald is. But he's a guy who's able to eat up double teams. He's able to destroy you one-on-one. He's a technician in the way we just talked about the hand placement, the hand technique. From Nick Bosa, same thing with Quinnen Williams, a guy who just uses swim moves to beat double teams, uses rip moves to beat double teams. He's able to stack and shed. We say that with offensive line. You want to stack these guys, get them out of the way. He's able to do that to offensive linemen with ease. He uses a push-pull move that he just throws guys around with. Quinnen Williams' tape against LSU is one of the most dominant films I've ever scouted. Just a guy who used getting double teamed probably 70% of the time. He had multiple sacks in that game. He had multiple QB hits, multiple pressures. That dude's just a freak who you can line up at three technique and can line up at one technique. You could use him as a nose tackle. I think that probably limit his ability, but you can literally line him up anywhere. He played at edge at Alabama. You can line him up anywhere along a defensive line, and he is going to be disruptive in some form or fashion. He's going to blow up a running play. He's going to pressure the quarterback. That's what he's going to be. So I don't know if he'll ever be the sack artist that Aaron Donald is, but he
is. He's incredible.
Yeah, he's going to be a mixture between like a Geno Atkins and Gerald McCoy. So like a step down from Aaron Donald, but more of a complete player, I'd say.
Oh my, yeah. What can you say in that regards? That's so much fun to hear you talk about him that way and about how they go after it and how he's going to win at the next level, because that's what it's about. Is winning at the next level. And this guy, like Aaron Donald, is scheme independent. Yeah, he may enjoy a certain scheme more, but it doesn't really matter where he goes, does it?
No, Alabama plays a pretty, unique front. They play some 3-4 or 4-3. They move their linebackers to edge rushers, move their defensive tackles to linebackers sometimes. They do some crazy stuff. So he played, like I said, he played defensive end. He played nose tackle. He played some 3 techniques. So he moved all around. He can play any of those positions up and down the line of scrimmage, but you want him getting after the quarterback, being a one-gapping defensive tackle that can get up the field, can control these blockers at the point of attack, and really, make plays in the backfield.
All right. Well, like you talked about the offensive center Bradbury, I think this guy is the safest pick in the draft. And he's number 1 material. I just love him. I love that you picked him number 1. I was happily surprised to find that out when I looked at your list because like a lot of people are picking, Joey Bosa up there, et cetera. And they're actually putting Williams down because he is a defensive tackle as low as 3 to 5. And I just don't see that. I think if you pass on this guy, I think you're making a huge mistake. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. A guy who, he didn't really get a lot of playing time until this year, but that's because he played on Alabama. So you had the Dalvin Tomlinsons, you had the Daron Paynes of the world plugging up the middle, playing well. So as soon as he got time to shine, he was absolutely dominant. And as you mentioned, I know I mentioned Garrett Bradbury is one of the safest players, but Quinnen Williams is by far the safest player in this draft class. A guy who has no injury history. He has no off-the-field concerns. He's just a guy.
He's got everything, man.
He's young. He's got the traits. He's an absolute freak athlete for his size. There's nothing not to like about Quinnen Williams. And if he's probably not going to go 1, he's probably not going to go 2. But if he slips out of top 5, the NFL is making a mistake.
Somehow he's going to fall to the New York Giants, and Gettleman is going to take him, and I'm going to just beat my head against the wall because that's going to be the end of the inside running game for the Dallas Cowboys. I'm telling you right there. I mean, wow.
Gettleman would never draft a player like Quinnen Williams. He's going to take Daniel Jones or Rashawn Gary.
I got to agree with you because, especially with what happened with those types of players down in Carolina. So, yeah. Hey, man, we're going to call it right there. We hit the number 1. That was awesome. Before we go real quick, tell people about how they can find you on Twitter and then also about what we're going to be doing coming up maybe with QBs, Clemson, safeties, et cetera, as we come up to the draft.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Connor NFL Draft. My positional rankings are coming out this week. We've already done quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, offensive line. Defenses are edge and defensive line are done now, waiting to get posted, published. So those should be out either tonight or tomorrow. Hopefully we'll have linebacker, cornerbacks, and safety out today or tomorrow as well. So we're hopefully getting all this out by Wednesday. And then Thursday, mid-morning, you'll have the 7-round mock draft, full 7-round mock draft, no trades, but full 7-round mock draft, all 32 teams. So I got to get started on that here in the next day or so, get that done. We did have a trade today, so I have to make sure my draft orders are good. So that's going to be fun, man. We got a lot of work to do.
Wow.
Draft starts on Thursday, so we got a lot of work in just about a day and a half. So.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. I understand that those things are going to come out in a tab series type organization, so you can bounce between them, compare them, use them and follow as we do the draft. We're also going to looking at doing like live during the draft for the first and second round. Maybe day 3, we don't know. We're definitely going to be reviewing each day. It's going to be a lot of fun. Remind you on social media before we go, please give us a retweet on Twitter, please on Instagram. Give us the love. You know how to do it. We really appreciate it. And for every other social media platform out there, YouTube, hit that subscribe button, hit that little bell. Thank you so much for watching.